New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 788 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. It's Sunday, January 18th, 2026. Duke still undefeated in the ACC as they become just the second team to go 2-0 on the West Coast trip since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC. We're here to talk about the 80-50 beatdown at Stanford. I am Donald Juan. I'm your host for this episode. Jason is on his way back to the United States. We have confirmation that he is on a plane because as I bring in Scott Rich, who's been so kind to be here for the last couple of weeks, he was texting us this morning furiously, which means he probably has airplane Wi-Fi, Scott.
Yeah, that was about to say the number of texts we're getting from Jason is steadily increasing, which means he must be steadily approaching the United States.
Yeah, so we will have him back on soon. Just for sake of transparency, what we are doing here, because obviously, as we know, funny enough, this basketball game that we're about to talk about was not the big story of the weekend in Duke sports. Obviously, Darian Mensah committing to the portal is the major story. I had a quick bites on that on Friday night, right as everything was happening, so go back and check that out. We're going to have this recap, which is just going to be its full episode, and then later on today, maybe like an hour or two after this episode drops, we will have a DBR Bites, which allows me and Scott to kind of talk more about Mensah entering the transfer portal. So look out for that. But let's talk about the basketball. As I mentioned, Duke goes on the road. They were on the West Coast. They should be on their way back now, if not already back. They played the Stanford Cardinal yesterday, and it was a lopsided 80-50 victory. Duke moves to 17-1 on the season, 6-0 in the ACC. And as I mentioned, since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC, only one team prior to Duke had gone out west and come back with a 2-0 against both Cal and Stanford. Duke becomes just the second team to do that in the ACC. Let's talk about some of the headlines from this game, and we got some cool ones that I looked at this morning. First off, John Grantland wrote, "Conclave catastrophe. Cam sweeps the Cardinal as Duke completely dominates Stanford." We had a lot of references to the Pope into the Cardinals from the Catholic Church, even though we're kind of talking about trees and colors.
Singular. Cardinal. Singular.
Yeah.
Failing grade. I my last act is substitute. I fail any headline that refers to Cardinals, plural.
Well, this one said Cardinal. So John Grantland.
Okay, fair.
He gets the A on this one. Brian Reckless, who great to hear from Brian again. Stanford stifled. Cardinal can't crack dominant Duke D. I like that one. Eric Savage just went straight to my heart. In and out business trip. Duke dominates due to Dame Sarr's animal-style defense. I love it. And now, Eric, I'm sorry. I'm hungry, so you are required to bring me some in and out. I don't know how you're going to do that, but that's your job now. Norris David wrote, Sarr Shank Penitentiary. We will talk about Dame Sarr's defense. And Lee Maxson just summed up the game by saying this. Timber. That was very easy. And Lee, that was awesome. Again, thank you to everybody who submitted headlines. We, of course, do this after every game. dbrpodcast@gmail.com. I will fully admit that the good is probably going to outweigh the bad on this game. That's what happens when you beat a team by 30. And Scott, as we get into this, I just want to start with this. We dominated from the opening tip. It was, I know some people had issues getting the game on live as we started. Of course, UNC was busy losing to Cal in the game before us. But from the moment that game appeared on the TV screen, Duke was in control, and they never let up.
And I think the difference, Duke fans have been looking for what does this team need to do to get off to a faster start. What we did was we got Cam Boozer the ball in the right places. It was not get Cam Boozer the ball, but have him jack a three, have him take a mid-range shot. It was get Cam Boozer the ball attacking the rim. That was the difference offensively. There was a flip side to that defensively, and I'm sure we'll spend a bunch of time talking about the good defensively. But if there is a cure for Duke's fast starts, it is the keep it simple, stupid solution, which is get Cam Boozer the ball and have him do Cam Boozer things. This was something we talked about in the preview. Stanford, especially with their injuries, didn't really have a guy who could match up with Cam Boozer or Pat Gongba for that matter. And it was all about, is Duke going to hammer the ball into the paint? And they did that from the jump. It was very encouraging to see Duke say, hey, we're on the road. We're tired. It's the second game of West Coast swing. The way we win this game is by doing what we do best. And that is by saying Cam Boozer's the best player in the country. Maybe we should let him do what he does best.
The halftime score was 35-19, and at halftime, Cam had 20 points and 9 rebounds and 3 steals. Cam outscored Stanford by himself in the first half. And it's funny, when you look at these stats, the Duke shooting was great. 56% from the field, 60% from two, 40% from three, 71% from the line. So you're right in the ballpark there. They only took 10 threes. So that further goes to the notion of, hey, we have we have an advantage inside. We have an advantage within 6 feet. Let's go ahead and use that to our advantage. And they went and hammered after them almost every single possession down the floor. And even the threes they took were wide open threes where, Stanford started to pack the paint and somebody was like, okay, you're basically daring me to shoot. I'm going to go ahead and do it. But again, they only took 10 threes as opposed to the last few games where we saw them take more threes than twos. They were dominant. They were trying to get the ball into the paint. They were trying to score from the paint, and score they did. 44 points for Duke. And again, a lot of it led by Cam, who had ended up with 30 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, and 0 turnovers, which I enjoyed because of the fact that it had become kind of a trend that he was getting 3 or 4 turnovers a game, mostly because he has the ball, but also because teams were kind of keying in on him once he got the ball. Stanford was not able to do much with Cam in the post, and it showed. And Cam really took over from the opening tip, and throughout the whole game was the constant North Star.
If Cam was the offensive star, we have to make sure at the jump we talk about the defensive star, who is star.
Yeah.
Dame Sar. There was a little bit of a Freudian slip there, the defensive star. Dame was fantastic. The thing that jumped out to me most is that he played 18 minutes in the first half. He was barely off the floor. Dame's been averaging 20 minutes a game for the season, and that's been lower over the last month or so as he sort of had his, mid-season freshman struggles. So Dame was playing so great defensively despite only making 1 basket, which was a thunderous basket that I'm sure we'll be talking about later. He was so stellar defensively that he was on the floor for essentially the entirety of the first half. This game plan of, hey, we are large enough that we can put our 6'7" nominal small forward on your point guard and have a 6-footer try to score against a 6'7" guy with length is a luxury that very, very few teams have. But I want to also mention that it was as good as Dame Sar was, and this only works with Dame Sar. There was a team defensive effort to make sure Okori did not take over the game. If you watch the film, every pick that he got was a hard hedge by our defenders. Every time a big came up to send a screen for him, either Pat Gongba or Cam Boozer or Malik Brown was hedging hard against that, essentially saying, yes, eventually Dame is going to get back because Dame is sticking to this man like glue, but we're not letting Okori get any momentum. We're not letting him get any momentum to the basket that Dame has to recover to. I thought that was a brilliant game plan. I also thought that it was pretty noticeable what Duke was doing in the few minutes that Dame Sar wasn't on the court, which was there was gravity to Ibuka Okori. You would see the bigs essentially staying off their man by 4 or 5 feet and leaking over to sort of put that pressure on Okori, which I thought makes a lot of sense because, yes, we talked in the preview, Stanford has a bunch of guys who are 3-point specialists, some of whom are sort of stretch fours. But it's a lot easier to recover to your man when you are helping out on the perimeter rather than if you are helping out on a guy getting into the paint. And what Duke basically said was, hey, Cam Boozer, come off your man now when Ibuka Okoro has the ball at the top of the key. Make it so that his lane is much more clogged up. And if he makes that pass, you're recovering 5 feet from the perimeter to a guy on the perimeter rather than recovering 8, 9 feet from the center of the lane out to the corner. I thought that the defensive game plan was stellar. I thought the execution of it from a team perspective, that team communication that we had earlier in the season that's sort of been lacking was there. And of course, it only works if Dame Sarr is being transcendent on defense, and he was.
Well, it seems like they really studied Stanford's game against UNC, and we kind of talked about it as well in the preview. The one thing that I thought that they did that was different than most games, I always talk about, the staying cut off the head and the body will wither. And of course, when you think about Stanford, Okoro is the engine that makes that offense go. But what they didn't do is say, usually they'll say, hey, head of the snake, you're done. You're not getting anything today, and we're going to let somebody else beat us. This time around, they said, Okoro, you're done. You're not getting the ball. You're not going, and you're also not going to get the ball to those other teammates who could kill us, right? Who could have a good day from shooting. And even when they, got it to an Agarwal or somebody else who is a 3-point specialist, we had someone there waiting for him. The rotations I thought were brilliant. They don't have Waffle House on the West Coast, but this team was scattered and smothered and covered like some hash browns, right? Every time a Stanford guy got the ball via the pass, it felt like there was 2 to 3 guys, one guy on the ball and 2 guys waiting in the midst to kind of shut off any passing lanes. I thought they were great. They held Stanford to just 35% from the floor, 24% from 3. They didn't give Stanford much of anything, and they forced 18 turnovers, 12 of them in the first half. The second half was kind of like, it just felt like, for me, I think I texted one of my best friends like, hey, I just want us to not allow 50 points. And they got right to 50 at the very end. But it was, again, a masterful defense that looked like the defense that we saw earlier the year, where getting to 40 points was cause for them to run laps because they were just that dominant on that side of the floor.
The thing that was perhaps most encouraging was that this ended up being a dominant effort. This didn't end up being a nail-biting effort. This was the first game in a while where I would say Duke aced the inflection point test. And it was funny enough because again, I forget who was on the call, but the color commentator must have been listening to the podcast because he was talking a lot about how this Duke team doesn't seem to have a killer instinct, doesn't seem to like to put teams away. Duke put Cal away, Duke put Stanford away. Duke put Cal away a couple days ago. Duke put Stanford away in this game, and they did it in the first half. Every time Stanford made a little bit, of a run, every time that lead got under 10, not only did Duke respond, but Duke stretched it out. And I think the end of the first half is the best example of this, where with about 3 minutes to go, Stanford cuts it to 8. You say, okay, this is the inflection point. Stanford cuts this further to 4 points by the end of the half. They have momentum. This is another, oh God, why isn't Duke putting them away? Instead, Duke goes on an 8-0 run. And that 8-0 run was Cam Boozer, Isaiah Evans from Cam Boozer, and Cam Boozer again. Duke is realizing that we have a momentum stopper, and his name is Cam Boozer, and he wears number 12, and he's the best player in the country. And combine that with the defense, which the defensive effort was stellar in those last few possessions, that shot clock violation that was Duke's last defensive possession of the half was one of the best 30 seconds of defense we've played on the year. That was the killer instinct that Duke fans have been looking for. And again, just the ability to go to the half up 16 versus up 5 or 6 changes the complexion of that game. And coming out of the half means Duke is going to put this game away rather than Duke is biting its nails about is Stanford going to come out hot.
and we were shooting well, right? Like it's one thing to hold Stanford to 19 points, but it's another thing to again get to your spots and score and make it where that lead is driven up a bit. I want to talk back on the offensive end about the fact that before the game in the preview, we talked about Stanford is a team that does not allow you to score via the pass. They're one of the best teams in the country at that. They have a 43.5% defensive assist rate. So, like on defense, they allow your teams to score via the pass 43.5% of the time. We had 16 assists on 28 made baskets. That's 57%. And again, it felt like we were finding guys in their spots. There's that great play where I think it was Cam was on the floor, dove for a loose ball, grabbed it, found I believe it was Isaiah Evans, and he just kind of very quickly lobbed it over the top because he was like, Pat's down there by himself. Everyone else is on the ground here with Cam. So all I got to do is just basically like hot potato this thing to Pat, and he has an easy basket. It's about finding those open guys, and whether they were finding them down low or they were finding. And we had a couple of plays where we had one guy down low with the ball and pass it to another guy down low for the finish. There was also that ping pong play that I think Slim was driving on one side. He kind of dished it off to Pat, who like kind of half fumbled it, but also like kind of like just patted it to the side because he knew can if he knew if it was deflected over there, the only person over there was Cam Boozer, and Cam Boozer caught it in stride and just kind of laid it in. And it looked
Were
like
you, were you talking about the alley oop to Malik?
no.
That the Malik was couldn't get and just sort of tipped to Cam because that was another example of
That
that.
was another example, yeah. But
Yeah.
this is one where it wasn't like feet were firmly on the ground when this happened. But again, it was like guys, even when they were driving to the basket, they were still had their eyes up to look for guys and maybe say, hey, if I see two guys crashing on me, that means I could get the ball to this guy who's going to be wide open underneath the rim. And so I'd love to see the stats from the average 2 point distance for this game because take out the fact, right, that we only attempted 10 threes is probably very, very low. It's probably a low number because it felt like everything we were doing was at the rim and we were working at the pass. I think it was great. I want to talk about one guy in particular right now. And that's Isaiah Evans with 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. Again, I think he only made 1 3. And
He only
the fact
took
that
two. He
he
only
only took
attempted two
two.
on the game.
He must be tired because he took 14 the other day. So, if you averaged it out, it's like, 8 apiece. But it's funny the fact that, again, that he is evolving his game where I'm sure Stanford was like, hey, he's going to start jacking up stuff from beyond the arc. So watch out whenever he has the ball. He definitely had times where he looked like he was going to shoot a three. And then, bam, he was blown past his defender and he was in the lane and he was trying to make something happen at the rim, whether it was via the pass or going for a shot. I loved the fact that he is starting. He's really tried to evolve his game over the last few weeks into more than just a 3 point shooter. Sure, we're gonna have those nights where that's what we need from him, and that's what's going. The defense is gonna play to him. But the fact that this time around he was like, no, I'm gonna barely shoot threes, and I'm gonna spend my time inside the paint because that's where the advantages are. I think is great for him to see that and recognize it. Is a good thing, and also again amongst the trees, the fact that he's able to finish through contact and finish over guys, or in some cases, dunk the life out of them, it is a great feature to have for a guy who most people around the country know as that guy on Duke who only shoots threes.
Yeah, this is now Isaiah's longest stretch of complete basketball, of playing and contributing to the game as more than just a 3 point specialist. There were a couple of his plays, one of which was actually going to be my play of the game over Dame Sarr's dunk, that were particularly impressive, that are plays that he does not make last year. And there are plays that were smart, heady plays of knowing that the defense is overplaying against him on the three and countering that. I also think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Isaiah Evans played another really, really nice defensive game.
Mm-hmm.
Part of why none of Stanford's secondary options were able to sort of pick up for the fact that, Corey was getting so much attention was because Isaiah Evans was playing really, really nice defense on those secondary 3 point shooters. He had another game where he had a steal, he had a couple assists, he had 4 rebounds. He's playing complete basketball. And when your guy who's supposed to be just a three-point shooter evolves into not just a three-point shooter, that is something that raises the ceiling on a team. And when that guy has all of the tools that Isaiah Evans has, there's the potential for that to be the second star next to Cam Boozer. That's what we've been hoping for all year. We're starting to see that momentum build. And that's something that's got to be really, really exciting for us as Duke fans and scary for the rest of the country.
The last thing I have in the good is, again, some of these intangibles. And I always look at these intangibles because sometimes they paint the story of how this game was won. Not necessarily this game, but it's still interesting to see where these intangibles look. Rebounding, we out-rebounded Stanford 35-29. Points from turnovers, I think, was the story. Again, Duke forced 18 turnovers, got 22 points off of those turnovers to just 6 from Stanford. In the paint, 44-20 was the advantage there. That's a difference of 24 points, and we won by 30. So you can see where a lot of that disparity came from. Second chance points, 17-11. Again, some of these intangibles can help paint details of close games. But even in a blowout like this, the fact that, again, you see that we were doing stuff through the paint. You see that we were getting points off of turnovers because we were forcing a lot of them while being relatively clean with the basketball. And just, again, like you said, any time that Stanford could feel like they had a chance to get back in the game, they didn't. Stanford's best scoring run was just 5 points. And that was like midway through the second half when we were already flirting with a 30-point lead. Our biggest run was 10, but we had multiples of those throughout the game, and we never trailed. So I like the fact that this team, finally, over the course of the last 6 games in the ACC, had a game where they put both halves together. As you mentioned, they had a strong start. They never relented, and everything on offense and defense felt like it was clicking for the most part. And we were able to walk out of there with Cam Sheffield and Jack Scott getting 4 minutes of playing time because they were able to check in this game and really make an impact whenever they needed to and get that run that they deserve because we were able to kind of make this a complete game from start to finish.
Kyle Smith in his post game made a mention of how, the one moment in the first half where it seemed like Stanford might be getting some momentum, they finally made a 3. And all of a sudden, Cam Boozer comes back and just immediately responds with a 3 of his own. It's like, well, you can't develop any momentum when that's happening. Cam he has a knack for doing that. It just always, again, this is a feel thing, but it feels like Cam Boozer always makes the 3 when the other team is about to go on that run. Those intangibles, stepping up to the moment, that is something that Cam Boozer is doing consistently, and that's to the point where the other coaches are just being like, what the heck are we going to do with this kid? That's a really fun place to be.
And in Maples Pavilion yesterday, I will say there was a lot of blue on the telecast. So shout out to all the Duke fans who were out there in the West Coast. Again, I know they don't get a lot of opportunities to see our team play. So the fact that they were able to show up both at Cal and especially at Stanford was great because I could feel that momentum build for us. And anytime we had a nice little run going, you could hear the Duke cheers in there. So for all of you were out there, good on you for showing up and showing out for our Blue Devils. Let's take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to talk about a couple of things to improve from this game. We're obviously going to get to our debate about the play of the game, our player of the week also. So stick around. More from us in the DVR podcast.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also they're a literal vampire. And suddenly my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Support for the Fans First Sports Network comes from Hypernatural Style. Men's Journal calls it the best men's polo shirt of 2024. Hypernatural offers polos, tees, and button-ups that deliver unmatched comfort and style. Hypernatural is a new generation of clean bio-performance clothing that reduces impact on the planet as well as your own health. Hypernatural created the first ever shirts made from jade stone and crab shells. Supreme natural comfort and cooling performance without harmful chemicals and plastic polyester. Visit hypernaturalstyle.com and receive 20% off at checkout using promo code FFSN. That's hypernaturalstyle.com using FFSN. Thank you for your support.
All right, we are back. We shift our attention to the things to improve in this game. And I will say the only thing, again, I'm kind of nitpicking here with a couple of these things. The only thing is in the first half, we only made 1 3. We were 1 for 6. It felt like at a time, and again, when you look back, you kind of go, Donnelly, you're crazy. It felt like we almost completely abandoned the 3 after, again, 4 or 5 games where we were almost exclusively relying on the 3 instead of our inside guys. And again, I like the fact that we were going inside. I think, again, I would love to see this team have a balanced attack, a balanced approach. You can't always get away with only shooting 10 threes in a game, especially in the ACC. We're going to have more games where we're going to have to shoot more threes just to, again, kind of balance out the attack when we have teams that have maybe a couple of guys that can contend with our bigs. But again, this is a very nitpicky thing. I would have loved to see us maybe shoot a couple more threes. Not like we don't have to go overboard here, but maybe a little bit more of a balanced attack. Again, just to kind of prepare for those games down the road where we'll need it.
I'm with you on the need of a balanced attack. I'm less about the shots we're taking and more about some of our other starters picking up a little bit of the slack. There were 2 guys in the starting lineup who, as great of a game as this was, probably didn't have their last night. One of whom was very obvious, Caleb Foster. We talked about how he was had his coming out party against Louisville. He sort of followed that up with 3 straight stinkers. Who knows? Again, when something like that happens, you always wonder, hey, is he sick? Hey, is he battling something? I don't think we've heard anything definitive one way or the other. But he only played 20 minutes in this game. He didn't score. He only had 2 rebounds, 1 turnover, 1 steal, no assists. That's not a very Caleb Foster stat line. It was sort of glossed over by the fact that Caden Boozer came in and played a very, very good game. But this Duke team needs Caleb Foster. This Duke team needs the Caleb Foster that we saw against Louisville to reach the heights that we want them to. The other player who, maybe somewhat surprising, I think didn't have his best game was Pat Gongba. And you look at his stat line, he had 13 points. Fantastic. He had 3 assists. He had 2 steals. Great. But he had 1 rebound on the game. And when your center has 1 rebound, that's always cause for concern. And part of that is, hey, Cam Boozer is a fantastic rebounder. Cam Boozer is sort of, getting every potential defensive rebound out there. Okay, fine. But we're going to start playing teams with bigger, more physical front lines. And we're going to start playing teams whose game plan is to just make Cam Boozer's life miserable. And when that eventually happens, we need to be able to lean on Pat Gongba to be that rebounding force, to use his big body, to use his 6'11" frame, to get the rebounds that maybe that Cam Boozer can't because he's drawing so much attention. Maybe, the game against Stanford, it wasn't the best test case because this team was sort of overmatched down low by Cam Boozer and Cam could just do whatever he wanted to. But our starting center can't be getting 1 rebound over the course of a game. That's something that you talk about the intangibles. That's an intangible thing. You sort of hope that Pat is going in and battling and getting some of those rebounds that fell to Cam. That's a mild cause for concern. And again, that's nitpicky from a guy who had 13 points on the game. But that's something that it's starting to become a little bit of a pattern with Pat that needs to be nipped in the bud.
Yeah, it's interesting because I looked at that and I go, well, you average our 2 big men. They had 15 rebounds, right? 8 apiece. There's 7.5 apiece. Cam just had 14 of them. But yeah, I think when you think about it, 35 to 29, I mentioned, was the rebounding margin. That seems a little bit low considering the fact that Stanford just did not have a lot of size down there. It's also a tribute to the fact that we didn't miss that many shots, right? So it's easier to not get as many offensive rebounds when you don't miss as many shots. But I think Pat, yeah, you always want Pat to be in that hopefully 6, 7 or higher range as far as rebounds, even with Cam getting double digits. That's just going to help Duke go, and really that'll also help his point total because a lot of those will probably be offensive offensive rebounds that he can then try to put back and either score or get to the line. So I think the one thing about Caleb, which is interesting, is that it wasn't that it was a quiet game from him, right? Like it wasn't like he just was passing the ball around and not taking shots. He took 5 shots. He just missed all 5. And so that it's not necessarily trend yet in my mind, but it's also something where you don't want that to continue to manifest itself where he misses a couple shots and all of a sudden he decides to disappear from the game. We want him involved in this game. We want him doing the things that, again, he does best, whether it's shooting the open three or really going to the lane, going through contact and finishing like he had been doing a couple of games ago.
And that's the key phrase, going through contact. That's what he
Not
did
around it,
against
yeah.
Louisville. And his first 2 shots, and Caleb took a couple of early shots in this game where he was at the rim, but all of a sudden it was the little hook shot fading away when he got to the rim rather than stop on 2 feet and go up strong. I'm not sure how that switch got sort of unflipped, but the last 3 games he hasn't done the things that made him successful against Louisville. So like that is still there. That is still in Caleb Foster. It's not like he's failing at the things he was doing against Louisville and maybe that was an aberration. Just for whatever reason, he has not been taking the same types of shots and attacking in the same way as he did against Louisville. Again, cause for concern or aberration, it's hard to tell. And again, it's been glossed over by the fact that his teammates have picked him up, and that's always a great luxury to have. But like I said, we need the Caleb Foster who played like he did against Louisville, playing through contact, saying, I'm 6'5", and I can finish strong at the rim, rather than the Caleb Foster who is trying to get around contact, because that is not something he's particularly adept at yet in his career.
Yeah, dunk on somebody. That, finish through contact, dunk on somebody, take someone's arm off. I'm cool with it, right? Like that's the aggression that we want from him when he's at the rim, especially, again, as you mentioned, because he's 6'5" and can go up amongst the trees. Let's go to our play of the game. And I think you've already hinted that there are a couple of candidates here. So I would like you to start and tell me your candidate for play of the game.
So the reason that I am not picking the loudest play is my play of the game is because I think that Isaiah Evans' finish in that 8-0 run to end the first half was more consequential in the course of the game. This was the play where Cam Boozer gets a steal. We run a set up on the wing. That's the dribble handoff to Isaiah. And 99 times out of 100 last year, when we run that play for Isaiah, he gets the dribble handoff. He sort of takes a one dribble back and puts up a 3. Yesterday, excuse me, he sort of countered off of that, finished cutting strong to the basket, gets the ball, and then goes up strong. It wasn't a thunder dunk. It wasn't an and one, but he got walled up by the defender. He had took the contact, put it up over him, finishes the 2. Every step of that play were things that Isaiah Evans does not do last year, maybe doesn't even do at the beginning of this season. And again, I think that was hugely consequential because that 8-0 run that doesn't happen if Isaiah doesn't finish that shot was the inflection point of the game. That was we're putting Stanford out of this rather than letting this be a game that we're sort of, biting our nails over at halftime. That was my play of the game, both for the impact and also it was a hell of a finish through a hell of a lot of contact that arguably should have been a much more thunderous and one.
I love that play. I thought that was a great play. I am going to go with the loudest play though, because it was so cool. Again, like 9:30 left in the first half, off a slim missed 3-pointer. Cam Boozer gets the offensive rebound, finds Sar beyond the arc, and Sar, we've seen Sar kind of it was the prime position for him, just step it and take that open three and try to bury it. Sar said, "Forget all that. I'm bringing the hammer." So he drives the lane and does just that. It felt like either there was nobody near him or the closest guy to him, which was underneath the rim, said, "That is not going in my book. I am vacating this premises," and he left. So it was a wide open lane for Sar to punch it down. And it was, again, I think that was for him, it was only his only basket of the game, but it was a competent one. It was kind of a reward for, as you mentioned, all the defensive greatness that he showed during the game. Is great for him to get that one signature moment from this game offensively. So I'm going with him for play of the game.
And I will say really quickly, even though Dame only had that one basket, there were a couple of other plays that I thought he made smart, heady plays on offense.
Yeah.
Particularly, there were a couple times on the fast break where he had the ball and the defender was back and he slowed it up. He made that pass. And we've seen all too often Dame just sort of attack, put his head down and go, and sort of, fumble the bag at the rim when it comes to a fast break that should be a couple easy points. I like the fact that Dame is starting to play to his strengths a little bit more, knowing that, hey, there are other players on this team who are better suited to attack this guy, who are better suited to attack in the fast break. Let me take a step back here and get the ball in the hands of the right player. Again, that wasn't as loud of a play as his fantastic dunk, but I'm seeing those things throughout the game that, again, are allowing Dame Sar to stay on the court, to do what he needs to do offensively, to be on the court, to have his impact defensively. I thought that was, there were a couple plays like that. That dunk obviously helped in order to keeping him on the floor to keep impacting the game.
I was just looking at Duke Blue Planet, and the Sar punch was the #1 play of the day. So I'm cool with it. I think, again, I love for him to get that signature moment for the game that he had defensively. So good on Dame Sar. Let's move to player of the week. I will go first, and I'm just going to go with Cam Boozer. Cam Boozer had 51 points on 19 of 27 from 2 of 6 from 3. He had 27 rebounds, 11 of them offensive, 6 assists, 3 steals, and a block this week. That's it. That's my player of the week. Who's yours?
I mean, okay. Can I give the non-Cam Boozer player of the week? Because
you sure can. This is our show. We can do what we want.
The answer is Cam Boozer. He's amazing. He's transcendent. But Isaiah Evans deserves his flowers for a fantastic week as well. 17 against Cal, 15 against Stanford, and consistent filling the box score games. Against Cal, we talked about he had those 3 blocks. Against Stanford, he had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal with only 1 turnover. Those are Isaiah Evans played 2 of his most complete basketball games. They weren't, I'm just blasting you from 3 and getting gaudy scoring numbers games. They were complete basketball games, the types of performances you want from the Robin to Cam Boozer's Batman. It's very clear that, who's Duke's second scorer. Isaiah Evans is Duke's second scorer, and he's shown that very consistently. Last 5 games, 28, 23, 21, 17, 15. And the 17 and 15 were in games where he didn't play quite as much because Duke had a much more comfortable lead. I'm very, very encouraged by the steps forward Isaiah Evans has took, particularly over this 2-game West Coast stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you were able to give him some flowers. I thought he had a tremendous week, as did our Devils. Again, coming home from the West Coast trip, 2-0 on the West Coast, and the second team in the ACC to have done that since Cal and Stanford joined the ACC. That will do it for this episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Again, check your feed, because in an hour or 2, you're going to get another episode from Scott and I about the Darian Minster transfer, and we will talk all about that on the next episode. But until then, he's Scott. I'm Donald. For Jason somewhere in the air. It's now the Duke Band playing us out and taking us home.